Question 1. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in the number of personal devices being used to access corporate applications and data through the Workspace ONE environment. While this offers flexibility, it also introduces potential security risks due to the lack of centralized management and patching on these devices. Which of the following approaches best addresses the inherent risks associated with this trend while ensuring operational continuity? Option A. Deploy Workspace ONE with its default security configurations and assume that these settings are sufficient to protect against all potential risks from unmanaged devices. Option B. Immediately enforce a strict policy prohibiting all personal devices from accessing corporate resources managed by Workspace ONE to eliminate any potential security exposure. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify specific threats and vulnerabilities posed by unmanaged devices, and then implement targeted security policies and controls within Workspace ONE, such as conditional access, data encryption, and application-level security. Option D. Prioritize the implementation of advanced endpoint detection and response (EDR) solutions for all personal devices, regardless of their actual risk profile or usage patterns. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify specific threats and vulnerabilities posed by unmanaged devices, and then implement targeted security policies and controls within Workspace ONE, such as conditional access, data encryption, and application-level security. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT, balancing the need for robust security with the operational realities of user productivity and device management. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with a new, potentially unmanaged class of devices accessing sensitive corporate resources. Without a structured risk assessment, the organization is vulnerable to data breaches, compliance violations, and operational disruptions. The professional challenge is to implement controls that are effective without being overly restrictive or burdensome, ensuring that the Workspace ONE deployment aligns with both security policies and business objectives. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment process. This begins with identifying the assets at risk, e.g., sensitive data, intellectual property, user credentials, the threats, e.g., malware, unauthorized access, data exfiltration, and the vulnerabilities, e.g., unpatched devices, weak authentication, lack of endpoint visibility. Based on this assessment, appropriate controls can be designed and implemented within Workspace ONE. This might include enforcing strong authentication, deploying endpoint security profiles, implementing data loss prevention, DLP policies, and establishing clear acceptable use policies. This approach is best professional practice because it is proactive, data-driven, and aligns with the principles of risk management, which are fundamental to IT security and compliance. It ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant threats and vulnerabilities. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket ban on all unmanaged devices without a thorough risk assessment is an overly restrictive approach that can hinder business operations and user productivity. It fails to acknowledge that some unmanaged devices might be used for low-risk activities or that alternative, less intrusive controls could be sufficient. This approach represents a failure in professional judgment by not considering the business impact and by resorting to a simplistic, albeit secure, solution that may not be proportionate to the actual risk. Deploying Workspace ONE with default security settings and assuming they are adequate for all scenarios is a passive and reactive approach. It neglects the critical step of understanding the specific threat landscape and the organization's unique risk profile. This failure to tailor security controls to the environment is a significant regulatory and ethical lapse, as it can lead to unaddressed vulnerabilities and potential breaches, violating the duty of care to protect organizational assets and data. Focusing solely on technical controls within Workspace ONE without considering user education and policy enforcement is an incomplete strategy. While technical controls are vital, human factors often contribute to security incidents. Ignoring the need for user awareness training and clear policies on device usage and data handling leaves a significant gap in the overall security posture, potentially leading to accidental or intentional misuse of corporate resources. This oversight demonstrates a lack of holistic risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first understanding the organization's specific risk appetite and compliance obligations. A structured risk assessment framework, such as ISO 31000 or NIST SB 800-30, should be employed. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and then determining appropriate mitigation strategies. The decision-making process should prioritize controls that offer the best balance between security, usability, and cost-effectiveness. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment and implemented controls are essential to adapt to evolving threats and business needs. Question 2. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in user login times and application launch delays across multiple device types managed by Workspace ONE. Which of the following approaches would be the most effective for optimizing the user experience and system performance? Option A. Advise users to manually clear their device caches and restart their applications to resolve the performance issues. Option B. Conduct a detailed analysis of Workspace ONE infrastructure logs, network latency between the console and enrolled devices, and the authentication flow to identify specific bottlenecks. Option C. Increase the allocated RAM and CPU resources for all Workspace ONE backend servers without further investigation. Option D. Immediately deploy a new, untested application deployment policy to all user groups to streamline access. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed analysis of Workspace ONE infrastructure logs, network latency between the console and enrolled devices, and the authentication flow to identify specific bottlenecks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where performance degradation impacts user experience and productivity. The professional's task is to identify the root cause and implement an effective solution within the constraints of the VMware Professional Workspace ONE Exam 2019 regulatory framework. This requires not only technical understanding, but also a strategic approach to process optimization that aligns with best practices for managing enterprise mobility solutions. The challenge lies in distinguishing between superficial fixes and fundamental improvements that address the underlying issues, ensuring compliance with the exam scope. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on a systematic, data-driven investigation of the Workspace ONE infrastructure and its interactions with the underlying network and endpoint devices. This involves analyzing logs, monitoring resource utilization, and correlating performance metrics with specific events or changes. By identifying bottlenecks in the authentication process, application delivery, or device communication, the professional can implement targeted optimizations. This aligns with the exam's emphasis on efficient and effective management of Workspace ONE, ensuring a stable and performant user environment. This methodical approach is best professional practice as it minimizes disruption, avoids unnecessary changes, and provides a clear path to resolution, all while adhering to the principles of sound IT governance and operational excellence expected within the VMware ecosystem. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach might involve immediately increasing server resources without a thorough investigation. This is a reactive measure that fails to address the root cause and can lead to increased costs and potential overprovisioning, which is inefficient and not a sustainable optimization strategy. It bypasses the critical step of diagnosing the actual problem, potentially masking underlying configuration or architectural issues. Another incorrect approach could be to focus solely on endpoint device settings without considering the Workspace ONE infrastructure. While endpoint configuration is important, performance issues often stem from the management platform itself or its integration with other systems. Neglecting the core infrastructure means the problem is unlikely to be fully resolved, leading to recurring issues and user dissatisfaction. This approach lacks a holistic view of the system. A third incorrect approach might be to implement a broad, untested change across the entire environment, such as a widespread policy modification, without isolating the impact or understanding its potential consequences. This is a high-risk strategy that can introduce new problems or exacerbate existing ones, leading to significant downtime and a loss of user trust. It demonstrates a lack of methodical problem-solving and adherence to change management best practices. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach performance issues by first gathering comprehensive data and establishing a baseline. This involves utilizing the diagnostic and monitoring tools available within Workspace ONE and related infrastructure. The next step is to form hypotheses about potential causes and systematically test them, prioritizing changes that are least likely to cause disruption. Documenting all findings, actions, and outcomes is crucial for future reference and continuous improvement. This structured decision-making process ensures that solutions are effective, efficient, and aligned with organizational goals and the specific requirements of managing a Workspace ONE deployment. Question 3. Analysis of a corporate security policy requiring strict separation of corporate and personal data on mobile devices, while ensuring employees can access essential business applications and data from both corporate-issued and personal devices, presents a strategic challenge for Workspace ONE administrators. Considering the need to protect sensitive corporate information from unauthorized access or exfiltration, which of the following approaches best aligns with both security best practices and user productivity requirements within the Workspace ONE framework? Option A. Implement PRAP VPN configurations and granular data loss prevention (DLP) policies to control data access and sharing for managed applications, while allowing personal applications to function independently on the device. Option B. Mandate that all corporate data be accessed exclusively through a full device VPN, regardless of the application being used, to ensure comprehensive network security. Option C. Prohibit access to all corporate resources from any personal device to eliminate potential security risks associated with unmanaged endpoints. Option D. Enable unrestricted access to all corporate data and applications from any device, including personal devices, without implementing any specific security controls beyond basic device authentication. Correct answer is A. Implement PRAP VPN configurations and granular data loss prevention (DLP) policies to control data access and sharing for managed applications, while allowing personal applications to function independently on the device. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise mobility management, balancing robust security with user productivity and accessibility. Professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the principles of least privilege and data segregation within the Workspace ONE framework, ensuring compliance with internal security policies and potentially industry-specific regulations. Though none are explicitly stated for this exam, best practice dictates adherence to general data protection principles. Careful judgment is required to avoid overrestriction, which can hinder user adoption and efficiency, or unrestriction, which can expose sensitive data. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it leverages Workspace ONE granular policy controls to enforce data segregation and access restrictions without creating an overly burdensome user experience. By configuring PRAP VPNs and data loss prevention (DLP) policies, administrators can ensure that corporate data access through managed applications remains within a secure, controlled environment, while personal data and applications are kept separate. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, granting access only to the resources necessary for a user's role and protecting sensitive information from unauthorized access or exfiltration. This proactive security posture minimizes the attack surface and reduces the risk of data breaches. An incorrect approach that restricts all access to corporate resources from unmanaged devices, regardless of the application or data sensitivity, fails to acknowledge the nuanced security capabilities of Workspace ONE. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it is overly restrictive, potentially violating the implicit agreement to provide necessary tools for employees to perform their duties. It also fails to implement a risk-based approach, treating all data and all devices with the same level of suspicion, which is inefficient and can lead to user frustration and workarounds that bypass security controls. Another incorrect approach that allows unrestricted access to all corporate data from any device, including personal ones, without any PRAP controls or VPN enforcement, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach completely disregards data protection principles and the concept of least privilege. It exposes sensitive corporate data to a high risk of unauthorized access, modification, or exfiltration, potentially leading to severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities if data privacy regulations are violated. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting organizational assets. A professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, understanding the sensitivity of the data being accessed, the threat landscape, and the capabilities of the chosen UEM solution. Administrators should then define clear security policies based on the principle of least privilege and data segregation. Implementing these policies using the granular controls offered by Workspace ONE, such as per-app VPNs, DLP policies, and conditional access, allows for a balanced approach that protects corporate assets while enabling user productivity. Regular review and updates of these policies are crucial to adapt to evolving threats and business needs. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates that a user is experiencing intermittent application crashes on their Workspace ONE managed device, and they have reported that their personal files appear to be inaccessible. The administrator suspects a potential malware infection or a configuration issue impacting the user's profile. What is the most appropriate course of action for the administrator to take? Option A. Inform the user that their issue is not a priority and that they should wait for a scheduled maintenance window to have their device reviewed. Option B. Advise the user to perform a factory reset of their device, as this is the quickest way to resolve most application and file access issues. Option C. Immediately access the user's device remotely, review their file system and application logs, and attempt to remediate the suspected malware or configuration issue directly. Option D. Escalate the incident to the security team, providing all relevant details, and follow the established incident response protocol for investigating potential data compromise and system instability. Correct answer is C. Immediately access the user's device remotely, review their file system and application logs, and attempt to remediate the suspected malware or configuration issue directly. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in IT administration, where a perceived shortcut for efficiency conflicts with data privacy principles and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to resolve a user issue with the long-term implications of unauthorized data access and potential breaches of trust and policy. The administrator must navigate the gray area between helpfulness and overreach, recognizing that even well-intentioned actions can have significant negative consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established policies and regulatory frameworks. By escalating the issue to the security team and following the documented incident response procedure, the administrator upholds data privacy, maintains audit trails, and ensures that any investigation or remediation is conducted by authorized personnel with the appropriate expertise and oversight. This aligns with the principles of least privilege and data protection, which are fundamental to maintaining a secure and compliant IT environment. The VMware Professional Workspace ONE Exam 2019, while focused on technical implementation, implicitly requires adherence to best practices in security and data handling, which are governed by broader regulatory expectations around data privacy and corporate policy. Incorrect approach is analysis. Accessing user data without explicit authorization or a documented incident response trigger violates data privacy principles and likely contravenes internal IT policies and potentially broader data protection regulations. This action bypasses established security protocols, creating a significant risk of unauthorized disclosure or modification of sensitive information. It also undermines the principle of accountability, as there is no clear justification or record for the access. Attempting to resolve the issue by directly manipulating user data without understanding the full scope of the problem or potential downstream impacts is a risky and unprofessional approach. This could inadvertently exacerbate the issue, compromise data integrity, or introduce new security vulnerabilities. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for established troubleshooting and incident management processes. Ignoring the issue and hoping it resolves itself is a failure of professional responsibility. It leaves the user without support and potentially allows a security or operational problem to persist and escalate, which can have broader organizational consequences. This passive approach neglects the duty of care owed to users and the organization's operational stability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always operate within the defined boundaries of their roles and responsibilities, guided by organizational policies and relevant regulations. When faced with an issue that may involve sensitive data or potential policy violations, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the nature of the issue and potential risks. 2. Consulting relevant policies and procedures. 3. Escalating to the appropriate team or authority if the issue falls outside their direct purview or requires specialized handling. 4. Documenting all actions and communications. This systematic approach ensures that actions are justifiable, compliant, and contribute to a secure and well-managed environment. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the current Workspace ONE UEM, Unified Endpoint Management, configuration for a large enterprise. The primary concern is the potential for unauthorized access to sensitive corporate data on managed mobile devices. The IT security team has proposed implementing a new policy that restricts access to specific applications based on device compliance status and location. However, the operations team is pushing for a quicker, less restrictive solution to minimize user disruption during a critical business period. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of secure and effective endpoint management as expected in a professional Workspace ONE deployment? Option A. Deploy a broad application access policy that allows all managed devices to access all corporate applications, with the understanding that security monitoring will be increased to detect any potential breaches after the fact. Option B. Utilize a custom scripting solution to enforce application access rules, bypassing the built-in Workspace ONE conditional access framework to achieve faster deployment, with the intention of migrating to a standard policy later. Option C. Enable a simplified access control mechanism that relies solely on user credentials for application access, deferring device compliance checks and location-based restrictions to a later, less critical business phase. Option D. Implement a comprehensive conditional access policy that leverages device compliance checks, user authentication, and network location data to dynamically grant or deny application access, ensuring that only compliant and authorized users on trusted networks can access sensitive data. Correct answer is D. Implement a comprehensive conditional access policy that leverages device compliance checks, user authentication, and network location data to dynamically grant or deny application access, ensuring that only compliant and authorized users on trusted networks can access sensitive data. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in assessing the effectiveness and compliance of a Workspace ONE deployment. Challenge lies in balancing the immediate operational needs of the business with the long-term security posture and adherence to VMware's recommended best practices, all within the context of the 2V0-61.19 exam scope. A key aspect of this scenario is the potential for shortcuts or expedient solutions that, while seemingly addressing an immediate problem, could introduce significant security vulnerabilities or operational inefficiencies, thereby failing to meet the standards expected of a VMware professional. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a holistic and proactive security and management strategy. It involves a systematic review of configurations against established benchmarks, ensuring that the deployment is not only functional but also secure, scalable, and maintainable. This aligns with the principles of robust IT governance and risk management, which are implicitly tested in the 2V0-61.19 exam by requiring a deep understanding of Workspace ONE capabilities and limitations. Adhering to VMware's documented best practices, as outlined in their official documentation and professional certifications, is paramount for ensuring a secure and efficient endpoint management solution. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate feature enablement, without considering the underlying security implications, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, enabling broad access to sensitive applications without proper conditional access policies or multi-factor authentication, MFA, directly contravenes security best practices and could lead to unauthorized data access, a violation of data protection principles. Similarly, bypassing standard deployment and configuration validation, steps in favor of rapid deployment, can introduce misconfigurations that are difficult to detect and remediate later, increasing the attack surface and potentially violating compliance requirements related to system integrity and auditability. Another failure would be to implement custom scripts or integrations without thorough testing and security vetting, which could introduce vulnerabilities or instability into the managed environment. The professional reasoning process for navigating such situations involves a structured approach. First, clearly define the business requirement. Second, identify potential solutions within the Workspace ONE framework. Third, rigorously assess each solution against security best practices, VMware's recommended configurations, and potential compliance implications. Fourth, prioritize solutions that offer a balance of functionality, security, and long-term manageability. And finally, document the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen approach, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 6. Research into the most effective and compliant authentication strategy for a new VMware Workspace ONE deployment, considering the need to secure sensitive corporate data while minimizing end-user friction, has identified several potential approaches. The organization operates under strict data privacy regulations that mandate robust access controls. Phased rollout is planned to ensure a smooth transition and allow for validation of the chosen method. Which authentication approach best balances security, user experience, and regulatory compliance for this scenario? Option A. Mandate a complex multi-step authentication process involving multiple passwords and security questions for every login. Option B. Rely solely on single-factor authentication using a strong password policy. Option C. Implement multi-factor authentication, MFA, combining a password with a push notification to a trusted device. Option D. Utilize SMS-based one-time passwords, OTP, as the primary authentication factor. Correct answer is C. Implement multi-factor authentication, MFA, combining a password with a push notification to a trusted device. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to balance user productivity with robust security controls within a regulated environment. The implementation of Workspace ONE requires careful consideration of data privacy and compliance requirements, which are paramount in the context of the VMware Professional Workspace ONE Exam 2019. The challenge lies in selecting an authentication method that is both secure and user-friendly, minimizing friction for end users while adhering to potential regulatory mandates regarding data access and protection. The need for a phased rollout adds complexity, requiring a strategy that allows for testing and validation without compromising existing security postures or disrupting business operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing multi-factor authentication, MFA, using a combination of a password and a push notification to a trusted device. This represents best professional practice because MFA significantly enhances security by requiring multiple forms of verification, making it much harder for unauthorized individuals to gain access. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this aligns with principles of data protection and due diligence, ensuring that sensitive corporate data accessed via Workspace ONE is adequately secured. The push notification method is generally considered user-friendly and efficient, contributing to a positive user experience while maintaining a high level of security. This approach directly addresses the core security objectives of Workspace ONE without introducing undue complexity or compromising compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing single-factor authentication solely based on a password fails to meet modern security standards and regulatory expectations for protecting sensitive data. This approach is ethically questionable as it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in safeguarding corporate assets and user information, potentially leading to data breaches and non-compliance with data protection regulations. Enforcing a complex, multi-step authentication process that requires users to remember multiple passwords and answer security questions for every login significantly hinders user productivity. While seemingly secure, this approach can lead to user frustration, workarounds that bypass security controls, and an overall negative impact on operational efficiency. Ethically, it can be argued that an overly burdensome security process that impedes legitimate work is not a balanced or sustainable solution. Deploying an authentication method that relies on easily compromised factors, such as SMS-based one-time passwords, OTP, without additional layers of security, presents a significant security risk. SMS OTPs are susceptible to interception and SIM swapping attacks, undermining the intended security benefits. This approach would be considered a failure in professional judgment and an ethical lapse, as it exposes the organization and its users to preventable security threats and potential regulatory violations related to data security. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to authentication. This involves understanding the sensitivity of the data being accessed, the potential impact of a breach, and the regulatory landscape. The decision-making process should prioritize security controls that are effective, user-friendly, and compliant. When implementing new technologies like Workspace ONE, a phased rollout with thorough testing and user feedback is crucial. Professionals must continuously evaluate authentication method to ensure they remain effective against evolving threats and meet compliance obligations, always striving for a balance between security and usability. Question 7. The monitoring system demonstrates an ability to collect extensive device telemetry, including application usage, network activity, and precise location data. The organization requires robust security policy enforcement, which necessitates visibility into device status and potential policy violations. However, user privacy is a significant concern, and the company aims to comply with best practices for data handling, which approach best balances security requirements with user privacy and regulatory compliance. Option A. Enable all available monitoring features within Workspace ONE, including broad collection of application usage, network activity, and location data, relying on the existing company privacy policy for user notification. Option B. Disable all advanced monitoring and telemetry features in Workspace ONE to ensure absolute user privacy, even if it means compromising some security policy enforcement capabilities. Option C. Enable location tracking by default for all devices and inform users, through a general privacy policy, that location data may be collected for security purposes. Option D. Configure Workspace ONE to collect only the device and security-related data necessary for enforcing security policies, and implement explicit user consent mechanisms for any collection of location data. Correct answer is D. Configure Workspace ONE to collect only the device and security-related data necessary for enforcing security policies, and implement explicit user consent mechanisms for any collection of location data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise mobility management, balancing user privacy with the need for security and operational visibility. The monitoring system's behavior, specifically its broad data collection without explicit user consent for all categories, raises immediate concerns regarding data privacy regulations and ethical considerations. The professional challenge lies in identifying the least intrusive yet effective method for achieving the desired security posture, while adhering to the principle of data minimization and user consent. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes user consent and data minimization, aligning with the principles of privacy by design and by default, which are foundational to many data protection regulations. By seeking explicit consent for location tracking and ensuring that only necessary data for security policy enforcement is collected, the administrator upholds user privacy rights. This approach demonstrates a commitment to transparency and user control, which are critical for building trust and complying with regulations that mandate informed consent for data processing, especially sensitive data like location. Incorrect approach is analysis. Collecting all available device data without explicit consent for each category, particularly location data, violates data privacy principles. This approach risks non-compliance with regulations that require specific consent for processing personal data, especially when it is sensitive or can be used to infer user behavior. It also erodes user trust, potentially leading to resistance or legal challenges. Enabling location tracking by default and relying on a general privacy policy to cover it is insufficient. Many regulations require granular, opt-in consent for location services, not just a blanket acceptance of a policy. This approach fails to adequately inform users about the specific data being collected and its purpose, creating a significant compliance risk. Disabling all monitoring features to avoid privacy concerns, while seemingly protective of privacy, fails to meet the organization's security objectives. This approach neglects the professional responsibility to implement and maintain a secure environment, potentially exposing the organization to risks that could have been mitigated through appropriate, consent-driven monitoring. It represents an abdication of security duties rather than a balanced solution. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach that prioritizes user privacy and regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the specific data protection laws applicable to the jurisdiction, in this case, implicitly U.S. regulations given the exam context, which emphasize consent and data minimization. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the minimum data required to achieve security objectives. 2. determining if that data constitutes personal or sensitive information. 3. Implementing mechanisms for explicit, informed user consent for any collection of such data. 4. Regularly reviewing and auditing data collection practices to ensure ongoing compliance and adherence to privacy principles. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a high probability of credential compromise leading to a significant data breach. As a Workspace ONE administrator, you are tasked with implementing multi-factor authentication, MFA, across the organization to mitigate this risk. Considering the diverse user base, device types, and application access requirements, what is the most effective and professionally sound approach to deploy MFA using Workspace ONE? Option A. Implement MFA universally and immediately for all users and devices, regardless of their current access patterns or technical readiness. Option B. Enforce MFA only on newly enrolled devices, allowing existing devices to continue authenticating without MFA to minimize initial user impact. Option C. Disable MFA for specific user groups that are deemed low risk to reduce the number of users requiring MFA enrollment and support. Option D. Begin with a pilot program targeting IT administrators, followed by a phased rollout to specific departments based on their risk profiles and technical readiness, with comprehensive user training and support. The correct answer is A. Implement MFA universally and immediately for all users and devices, regardless of their current access patterns or technical readiness. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical security control, multi-factor authentication, MFA, needs to be enforced across a diverse user base with varying access needs and device types. The challenge lies in balancing robust security with user experience and operational continuity. A poorly implemented MFA rollout can lead to significant user frustration, increased help desk tickets, and potential security gaps if users find workarounds. The risk matrix highlights the potential impact of a breach due to compromised credentials, making the successful and compliant implementation of MFA paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy, starting with a pilot group of IT administrators, and then expanding to specific departments based on risk profiles and technical readiness. This allows for early detection and resolution of technical issues, user feedback collection, and refinement of training materials before a full-scale deployment. This method aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation, ensuring that security controls are implemented effectively without causing undue disruption. It also allows for granular policy application within Workspace ONE, targeting specific user groups and applications as per the organization's security policies, which are implicitly governed by general IT security best practices and potentially internal compliance mandates. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing MFA universally and immediately without a pilot or phased approach risks overwhelming IT support and causing widespread user disruption, potentially leading to non-compliance with internal security policies if users are unable to access necessary resources. This approach fails to demonstrate due diligence in managing the change effectively. Enforcing MFA only on new device enrollments ignores existing devices and the associated credential compromise risks, creating a significant security blind spot. This selective application of a critical security control is a failure to implement a comprehensive security posture as generally expected in professional IT environments. Disabling MFA for specific user groups deemed low risk without a thorough, documented, and approved risk assessment process is a direct violation of security principles. This ad hoc exception-making process bypasses established security protocols and introduces unacceptable vulnerabilities, potentially failing to meet general compliance expectations for consistent security enforcement. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such implementations by first understanding the organization's security posture, risk tolerance, and compliance requirements. A structured approach involving planning, piloting, phased deployment, comprehensive user training, and ongoing monitoring is essential. This iterative process allows for adaptation and ensures that security controls are both effective and practical. Decision-making should be guided by a principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that security measures are applied judiciously and with minimal negative impact on legitimate business operations. Question 9. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Workspace ONE administrator when a senior executive requests immediate, unrestricted access to a sensitive customer database from a personal, unmanaged device, citing an urgent business need, and the standard access protocols would take several hours to process. Option A. Immediately grant full, unrestricted access to the database from the personal device to meet the executive's urgent request, assuring them that security protocols will be reviewed later. Option B. Provide the executive with the credentials to access the database through a public, unsecured network connection to expedite their task. Option C. Refuse the request outright, explaining that unmanaged devices and unrestricted access are strictly prohibited by company policy, and advise the executive to wait for standard processing. Option D. Grant temporary, audited access to the specific data required via a secure, managed channel, while simultaneously initiating the formal process for full access and educating the executive on the risks of unmanaged devices. The correct answer is D. Grant temporary, audited access to the specific data required via a secure, managed channel, while simultaneously initiating the formal process for full access and educating the executive on the risks of unmanaged devices. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a user's perceived need for immediate access to sensitive company data and the organization's responsibility to maintain data security and compliance with VMware Workspace, one best practices and potential regulatory frameworks that govern data handling. The administrator must balance user productivity with the imperative to protect confidential information from unauthorized access or disclosure. Careful judgment is required to avoid compromising security while still enabling legitimate business functions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, documented, and compliant method for granting access. By adhering to established policies and procedures, the administrator ensures that any access granted is authorized, auditable, and aligned with the organization's security posture. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of data breaches and regulatory noncompliance, which are critical considerations in a professional IT environment. It also fosters a culture of accountability and transparency. An incorrect approach that involves bypassing established protocols for expediency would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an action could lead to unauthorized access to sensitive data, violating data privacy regulations and internal security policies. This creates an audit trail gap, making it impossible to track who accessed what data and when, which is a critical requirement for compliance and incident response. Furthermore, it sets a dangerous precedent, encouraging other users or administrators to circumvent security measures, thereby increasing the overall risk to the organization. Another incorrect approach, such as outright refusal without exploring alternatives, might be perceived as unhelpful and could lead to user frustration and potentially the use of insecure workarounds by the user. While security is paramount, a complete lack of flexibility can hinder legitimate business operations and damage the IT department's relationship with end users. This approach fails to consider the business impact and the need for a balanced solution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of organizational policies, relevant regulations, and the specific context of the request. It requires a systematic evaluation of risks and benefits associated with each potential course of action. When faced with a request that challenges existing security measures, a professional should first consult established policies and procedures. If the request falls outside these parameters, the next step is to engage with relevant stakeholders, such as security teams or management, to assess the legitimacy of the request and explore secure, compliant alternatives. Documenting all decisions and actions is crucial for accountability and future reference. Question 10. The review process indicates that a Workspace ONE administrator, while troubleshooting a user's device connectivity issue, accessed the user's personal application data and browsing history without explicit prior authorization, believing it would expedite the resolution. The administrator documented the troubleshooting steps taken, but did not specifically record the access to personal application data or browsing history as a separate action. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the IT management team to take in response to this situation? Option A. Escalate the issue to the legal department for immediate disciplinary action against the administrator, citing a severe breach of privacy. Option B. Issue a verbal warning to the administrator and remind them of the importance of following standard troubleshooting procedures, assuming the intent was to help the user. Option C. Conduct a formal investigation into the administrator's actions. Review the Workspace ONE access logs and audit trails, and reinforce the organization's data privacy policies and procedures with the administrator and the wider IT team. Option D. Acknowledge the administrator's initiative in trying to resolve the issue quickly, and consider updating the troubleshooting guide to include access to personal data when deemed necessary for faster resolution. The correct answer is C. Conduct a formal investigation into the administrator's actions, review the Workspace ONE access logs and audit trails, and reinforce the organization's data privacy policies and procedures with the administrator and the wider IT team. Explanation: the review process indicates a potential conflict of interest and a breach of data privacy principles within the Workspace ONE deployment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient troubleshooting and system monitoring with the absolute requirement to protect end-user data and maintain trust. The administrator's access to sensitive user information, even if for legitimate technical purposes, necessitates strict adherence to data handling policies and ethical considerations. The correct approach involves prioritizing data privacy and adhering to established organizational policies for accessing and handling sensitive information. This aligns with the core principles of data protection and user confidentiality, which are paramount in any IT environment, especially when dealing with endpoint management solutions like Workspace ONE. Best professional practice dictates that any access to sensitive data must be logged, authorized, and strictly limited to what is necessary for the task at hand, with clear audit trails. This approach upholds regulatory compliance and ethical standards. An incorrect approach would be to access user data without explicit authorization or a documented need, even if the intention is to resolve an issue quickly. This constitutes a violation of privacy policies and potentially regulatory frameworks governing data protection. Another incorrect approach is to share or discuss sensitive user data with unauthorized personnel, regardless of the perceived benign intent. This is a direct breach of confidentiality and can lead to severe reputational damage and legal repercussions. Failing to document the access and the reason for it also represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it prevents accountability and oversight. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the potential ethical and regulatory implications of any action. This involves consulting organizational policies, relevant data protection laws, and seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments when in doubt. The principle of least privilege and the necessity of documented authorization should always guide access to sensitive information. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a business unit has requested unrestricted access to all application data and user activity logs on employee-owned devices enrolled in Workspace ONE, citing a need for enhanced security monitoring. As a Workspace ONE administrator, you are concerned about the potential privacy implications of such broad access. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Implement the unrestricted access and then begin a process to document the justification for this level of access after the fact. Option B. Engage with the business unit to understand the specific security risks they aim to mitigate and explore alternative, less intrusive methods for achieving their security objectives, such as targeted logging or specific application data access based on defined policies. Option C. Immediately grant the unrestricted access as requested to ensure compliance with the business unit's directive and avoid potential security gaps. Option D. Refuse the request entirely, stating that employee privacy on personal devices cannot be compromised under any circumstances, without further discussion. The correct answer is B. Engage with the business unit to understand the specific security risks they aim to mitigate and explore alternative, less intrusive methods for achieving their security objectives, such as targeted logging or specific application data access based on defined policies. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical responsibility to protect sensitive user data while also fulfilling business requirements for device management and security. The administrator is caught between a directive that could compromise user privacy and the inherent duty to uphold data protection principles. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive security visibility with the user's expectation of privacy, especially when dealing with personal devices. Careful judgment is required to avoid overreach and maintain trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes user privacy and data minimization. By seeking to understand the specific security risks that necessitate the requested level of access and exploring alternative, less intrusive methods to achieve the desired security posture, the administrator upholds ethical best practices. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and the general expectation that personal data should not be accessed or monitored without a clear, justifiable, and proportionate need. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible data handling and user trust, which are paramount in managing endpoint security solutions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing the requested broad access without further investigation. This fails to uphold the principle of data minimization and could lead to unnecessary collection and potential misuse of sensitive user information, violating privacy expectations and potentially contravening data protection regulations that mandate proportionality and necessity for data access. Another incorrect approach is to refuse the request outright without attempting to understand the underlying security concerns or proposing alternative solutions. While privacy is important, a complete refusal without engagement can hinder necessary security measures and create friction between IT and business units. This approach lacks the collaborative problem-solving required for effective IT governance and security. A third incorrect approach is to implement the broad access and then attempt to retroactively justify it. This is ethically unsound as it prioritizes compliance after the fact rather than proactive ethical consideration. It also risks discovering regulatory or policy violations only after data has already been accessed inappropriately. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that begins with understanding the why behind a request, especially when it involves sensitive data. This involves questioning the necessity and proportionality of the proposed action. If a request appears to infringe on privacy or data minimization principles, the next step is to explore less intrusive alternatives that achieve the same objective. Open communication with the requesting party to explain the concerns and collaboratively find a balanced solution is crucial. Documenting the decision-making process, including the rationale for choosing a particular approach and the alternatives considered, is also a key component of professional responsibility. Question 12. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly seeking to automate routine IT tasks and streamline user workflows to improve operational efficiency and employee productivity. Within the context of VMware Workspace, 1. Which of the following approaches to process optimization is most aligned with best professional practices for security and compliance? Option A. Rapidly deploying new features and configurations to all users as soon as they become available, with minimal testing, to ensure the organization is always on the latest version and benefiting from immediate enhancements. Option B. Disabling all non-essential security alerts and notifications within Workspace ONE to minimize distractions for IT staff and allow them to focus on more critical issues, thereby improving response times. Option C. Implementing automated workflows for user onboarding and offboarding, leveraging Workspace ONE integration capabilities to reduce manual intervention and potential for human error, while ensuring all automated processes adhere to predefined security policies and audit trails. Option D. Focusing exclusively on reducing the number of steps in user-facing processes without considering the underlying security controls or data access permissions granted during these streamlined workflows. Correct answer is C. Implementing automated workflows for user onboarding and offboarding, leveraging Workspace ONE integration capabilities to reduce manual intervention and potential for human error, while ensuring all automated processes adhere to predefined security policies and audit trails. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments, balancing the need for efficient and streamlined processes with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing process optimizations within Workspace ONE that do not inadvertently create security vulnerabilities or violate the principles of data privacy and integrity, which are paramount in regulated industries. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine efficiency gains and those that introduce unacceptable risks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, risk-aware methodology for process optimization. By focusing on automation of routine tasks, streamlining user onboarding, and leveraging Workspace One built-in analytics for continuous improvement. It aligns with the principles of least privilege, data minimization, and proactive security posture. This approach ensures that optimizations are not only efficient, but also secure and compliant, reflecting a mature understanding of IT governance and operational excellence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid deployment without adequate testing or security validation would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to the accidental exposure of sensitive data, non-compliance with data protection regulations, such as those governing personal identifiable information, and a breach of trust with users and stakeholders. Another incorrect approach that overlooks the importance of user experience in the optimization process could lead to decreased user adoption and productivity, undermining the very goals of process improvement and potentially creating shadow IT solutions that bypass managed controls. A third incorrect approach that neglects to document changes and their impact would fail to meet audit requirements and hinder future troubleshooting or compliance verification, representing a failure in operational transparency and accountability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of current processes and their associated risks. This should be followed by identifying specific areas for improvement, evaluating potential solutions within Workspace One, and conducting rigorous testing in a controlled environment. The process should include a security and compliance review before any changes are implemented in production. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure that optimizations remain effective and secure over time. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows a proposed optimization for application deployment within Workspace One, aiming to reduce the time it takes for users to access critical business applications. The proposed method involves bypassing certain pre-deployment security checks and streamlining the approval workflow to expedite the rollout. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for process optimization in a managed IT environment? Option A. Implement the proposed optimization, prioritizing rapid deployment and user access speed above all other considerations. Option B. Focus solely on automating the approval workflow, assuming that the security of the applications themselves is sufficient without additional pre-deployment validation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire application deployment lifecycle, assessing security implications, compliance requirements, and user experience impact before implementing any changes. Option D. Revert to a manual deployment process for all applications to ensure maximum control and oversight, even if it significantly increases deployment times. Correct answer is A. Implement the proposed optimization, prioritizing rapid deployment and user access speed above all other considerations. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a common challenge in IT process optimization, balancing efficiency gains with the need for robust security and compliance. In the context of Workspace One and its regulatory framework, which for this exam is assumed to be a generic, non-jurisdiction-specific professional standard for IT management, the challenge lies in identifying improvements that do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or violate established best practices for data handling and user access. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a holistic review that considers the interconnectedness of process optimization with security, compliance, and user experience. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and the need for auditable processes, ensuring that any changes are not only efficient, but also secure and compliant with general IT governance principles. It demonstrates a mature understanding of the Workspace One platform's capabilities and its role within a broader IT ecosystem. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed of deployment without considering security implications represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It risks exposing sensitive data, violating data privacy principles, and creating compliance gaps that could lead to reputational damage and potential sanctions, even in a non-jurisdiction-specific context where general IT governance standards are paramount. Another incorrect approach that overlooks user impact can lead to decreased productivity and increased support overhead, undermining the very goals of process optimization and potentially leading to shadow IT solutions that bypass managed controls. Finally, an approach that relies on outdated or unverified methods ignores the dynamic nature of technology and security, failing to leverage the full potential of Workspace ONE and potentially introducing legacy vulnerabilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of process optimization, followed by a thorough assessment of the current state, including existing security controls, compliance requirements, and user workflows. Potential solutions should then be evaluated against these criteria, with a strong emphasis on risk assessment, pilot testing, and phased implementation. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are crucial to ensure ongoing effectiveness and adherence to evolving best practices. Question 14. During the evaluation of a Workspace ONE deployment's process optimization, which of the following strategies best aligns with achieving sustainable efficiency gains and maintaining a robust security posture? Option A. Deploying a custom script to automate user onboarding for a specific application, bypassing the standard Workspace ONE enrollment process to expedite access. Option B. Implementing a comprehensive review of application delivery workflows, authentication mechanisms, and device compliance policies, followed by a phased rollout of improvements based on data analysis and user feedback. Option C. Enabling direct access to all internal resources for all managed devices without requiring multi-factor authentication to simplify the user experience. Option D. Prioritizing the implementation of a single, complex automation for a minor administrative task without assessing its impact on other Workspace ONE services. The correct answer is B. Implementing a comprehensive review of application delivery workflows, authentication mechanisms, and device compliance policies, followed by a phased rollout of improvements based on data analysis and user feedback. Explanation. During the evaluation of a Workspace ONE deployment for process optimization, a common challenge arises from balancing the desire for immediate efficiency gains with the long-term implications of architectural choices. Organizations often face pressure to quickly implement new features or streamline existing workflows, which can lead to adopting solutions that are technically feasible but not strategically aligned with best practices or future scalability. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of the Workspace ONE architecture, its integration points, and the underlying business processes to identify optimizations that are both effective and sustainable. A hasty decision based on superficial improvements can result in technical debt, increased complexity, and ultimately hinder future innovation. The correct approach involves a holistic review of the current Workspace ONE deployment, focusing on identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies through data-driven analysis and user feedback. This includes assessing the effectiveness of current application delivery methods, authentication flows, and device management policies. Best professional practice dictates a phased implementation of optimizations, prioritizing those that offer the most significant return on investment in terms of user experience, security posture, and administrative overhead, while ensuring alignment with VMware's recommended architectures and the principles of least privilege. This approach minimizes disruption, allows for iterative refinement, and ensures that optimizations contribute to the overall strategic goal of the organization. An incorrect approach would be to implement a solution that bypasses established security protocols for the sake of perceived speed. For example, enabling broad access to sensitive applications without robust multi-factor authentication or conditional access policies creates a significant security vulnerability, violating the principle of protecting organizational data and user identities. Another incorrect approach is to implement custom scripting or complex workaround to achieve a desired outcome without first exploring native Workspace ONE capabilities or documented best practices. This often leads to unmanageable configurations, increased support burden, and potential conflicts with future Workspace ONE updates, representing a failure in diligent and efficient system administration. Furthermore, prioritizing a single, isolated optimization without considering its impact on other components of the Workspace ONE ecosystem, such as identity management or endpoint security, can lead to unintended consequences and a fragmented user experience. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured methodology. First, clearly define the problem or inefficiency to be addressed. Second, gather relevant data and user feedback to understand the scope and impact. Third, research and evaluate potential solutions, considering native Workspace ONE features, VMware best practices and industry standards. Fourth, conduct a risk assessment for each viable solution, including security, operational, and user experience impacts. Fifth, develop a phased implementation plan with clear success metrics and rollback procedures. Finally, continuously monitor and iterate on the implemented optimizations to ensure ongoing effectiveness and alignment with business objectives. Question 15. Market research demonstrates that a significant portion of end-user support tickets are related to repetitive manual tasks within the Workspace ONE environment. To address this, a proposal has been made to implement a broad, automated solution across all user groups to streamline these tasks. However, concerns have been raised about the potential impact on user experience and the security implications of widespread automation without prior validation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with process optimization principles within the VMware Professional Workspace ONE framework? Option A. Immediately deploy the automated solution to all users to achieve maximum efficiency gains and cost savings as quickly as possible. Option B. Prioritize the implementation of the cheapest available automation tools to achieve immediate cost reductions, regardless of their impact on existing workflows or security posture. Option C. Implement a pilot program with a representative subset of users to test the automated solution, gather feedback, and refine the process before a full organizational rollout. Option D. Automate all identified repetitive tasks without user involvement, focusing solely on the technical implementation of the automation scripts. The correct answer is C. Implement a pilot program with a representative subset of users to test the automated solution, gather feedback, and refine the process before a full organizational rollout. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where the drive for efficiency and cost savings can sometimes conflict with the need for robust security and user experience. The professional challenge lies in balancing these competing priorities while adhering to the principles of process optimization as defined within the VMware Professional Workspace ONE framework. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any optimization efforts do not inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or negatively impact end-user productivity, which could lead to compliance issues or operational disruptions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, data-driven implementation of process optimization. This aligns with the VMware Professional Workspace ONE methodology, which emphasizes iterative improvements and validation. By starting with a pilot group and gathering feedback, the IT team can identify and address potential issues before a full rollout, minimizing risk and ensuring that the optimized processes are effective and user-friendly. This methodical approach also supports the principle of least privilege and secure configuration, as changes are carefully monitored and validated. An incorrect approach that bypasses pilot testing and broad user feedback introduces significant regulatory and ethical risks. It fails to uphold the principle of due diligence in IT management, potentially leading to widespread disruption if the optimization is flawed. From a compliance perspective, a poorly implemented process could inadvertently violate data privacy regulations if it leads to unauthorized access or data leakage. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for user impact and could erode trust within the organization. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on automation without considering the underlying workflows or user impact is also professionally unacceptable. While automation is a key component of process optimization, it must be applied thoughtfully. Automating inefficient or insecure processes simply amplifies those problems. This approach fails to meet the standards of effective IT governance and could lead to increased support overhead and security incidents. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes cost reduction above all else, even at the expense of security or functionality, is a direct violation of responsible IT management. While cost-effectiveness is important, it should not be pursued in a manner that compromises the integrity or security of the IT environment. This can lead to significant long-term costs associated with security breaches, data loss, or system downtime, far outweighing any initial savings. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of current processes, identification of optimization opportunities, and a clear understanding of the potential impact on security, user experience, and compliance. A phased approach, starting with small-scale pilots, gathering data and feedback, and iteratively refining the processes, is crucial. Professionals must always consider the VMware Professional Workspace One best practices, which advocate for a balanced approach to efficiency, security, and user enablement. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that a new organizational security policy mandates the encryption of all sensitive data stored on managed mobile devices. As a Workspace One administrator, you need to implement this policy effectively across a diverse fleet of iOS and Android devices, including those used for critical business functions and those used for general employee access. What is the most prudent approach to ensure compliance while minimizing disruption? Option A. Implement the encryption policy only on devices that are not actively used by employees to avoid impacting productivity. Option B. Apply the encryption policy exclusively to devices that are actively used by employees for critical business functions. Option C. Immediately enforce the encryption policy on all iOS and Android devices managed by Workspace One. Option D. Deploy the encryption policy to a pilot group of non-critical devices first, then to devices running critical business applications, and finally to all remaining devices. The correct answer is D. Deploy the encryption policy to a pilot group of non-critical devices first, then to devices running critical business applications, and finally to all remaining devices. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where a new security policy needs to be implemented across a diverse range of devices managed by Workspace One. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security with the potential impact on user productivity and the operational continuity of critical business applications. The requirement to adhere strictly to the VMware Professional Workspace One Exam 2019, 2V0-61. 19. Syllabus, which implicitly governs the technical and operational best practices within the Workspace One ecosystem, necessitates a solution that is both effective and compliant with the platform's capabilities and intended use. The absence of explicit external regulatory frameworks in this context means that adherence to the exam scope and the inherent best practices of Workspace One management are the primary guiding principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout and targeted application of the security policy. This aligns with best practices for enterprise-wide change management and security implementation. By first testing the policy on a pilot group of non-critical devices, administrators can identify and resolve any compatibility issues or unintended consequences before a full deployment. Subsequently, applying the policy to critical business applications and then to all remaining devices ensures that essential operations are not disrupted and that the security posture is progressively strengthened. This methodical approach minimizes risk, maximizes user adoption, and ensures the integrity of the Workspace One environment as per the exam's expected competencies. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the security policy immediately across all devices without prior testing or segmentation is a high-risk strategy. This approach fails to account for potential conflicts with existing applications or device configurations, which could lead to widespread service disruptions and significant productivity loss. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the operational impact, which is contrary to professional IT management principles expected within the scope of the 2V0-61. 19 exam. Applying the security policy only to devices with critical business applications, while seemingly focused on essential assets, is incomplete. This overlooks the broader security landscape and leaves other devices, which may still contain sensitive data or be entry points for threats, vulnerable. A comprehensive security strategy requires a more holistic approach to device management. Excluding devices that are not actively used by employees from the policy implementation is also problematic. Even inactive devices can pose a security risk if they are compromised or if they contain outdated sensitive information. Robust security policy should encompass all managed endpoints to maintain a consistent security posture across the entire organization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to implementing significant changes like security policies. This involves understanding the potential impact on users and business operations, leveraging the capabilities of the management platform, Workspace One in this case, for granular control, and prioritizing testing and validation before broad deployment. The decision-making process should involve assessing the criticality of the policy, the diversity of the managed device fleet, and the potential for unintended consequences, always aiming for a balance between security and operational efficiency. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates a new mandate requiring explicit employee consent for any device monitoring activities performed by enterprise mobility management solutions. Given the organization's current Workspace ONE deployment, which of the following actions best addresses this regulatory requirement while maintaining operational integrity? Option A. Update Workspace ONE policies to include a mandatory consent acknowledgement during the next device check-in, clearly outlining the types of monitoring and the purpose of data collection, and communicate these changes via company-wide email and intranet. Option B. Proceed with the current Workspace ONE configuration and await a formal audit to identify any potential compliance issues. Option C. Implement the new consent requirement only for newly provisioned devices, assuming existing devices are grandfathered under previous policies. Option D. Conduct a full technical audit of the Workspace ONE infrastructure and then deploy a custom script to enforce consent without prior employee notification. The correct answer is A. Update Workspace ONE policies to include a mandatory consent acknowledgement during the next device check-in, clearly outlining the types of monitoring and the purpose of data collection, and communicate these changes via company-wide email and intranet. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise mobility management where a new regulatory requirement, specifically related to data privacy and employee consent for device monitoring, impacts the existing Workspace ONE deployment. The professional challenge lies in balancing the organization's need for security and operational visibility with the stringent requirements of the new regulation, ensuring compliance without unduly hindering productivity or alienating employees. The need for a phased and well-communicated approach is paramount to avoid disruption and potential legal repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the Workspace ONE configuration against the new regulatory framework, followed by a targeted update to the device policies and end-user communication strategy. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing compliance and transparency. Specifically, it addresses the regulatory mandate for explicit employee consent by incorporating a clear opt-in mechanism within the Workspace ONE enrollment or policy update process. This proactive and systematic method ensures that all aspects of the deployment are scrutinized for compliance, minimizing the risk of violations. The emphasis on clear communication with employees about the changes and their rights is crucial for fostering trust and ensuring smooth adoption, thereby representing ethical and professional conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the regulatory changes without a thorough review of the existing Workspace ONE configuration risks overlooking critical compliance gaps or introducing unintended consequences. This approach is professionally unacceptable as it bypasses due diligence, potentially leading to non-compliance and subsequent penalties. It fails to address the specific nuances of how Workspace ONE collects and processes data in relation to the new consent requirements. Applying the regulatory changes solely to new device enrollments, while ignoring existing devices, creates an inconsistent compliance posture. This is a regulatory failure because the regulation likely applies to all devices under the organization's management, regardless of their enrollment date. It also presents an ethical issue by potentially treating different employee groups unequally in terms of data privacy. Ignoring the regulatory changes until a formal audit is conducted is a severe professional and ethical failure. This reactive stance demonstrates a disregard for legal obligations and a lack of proactive risk management. It exposes the organization to significant legal and financial risks and erodes employee trust by failing to uphold their privacy rights in a timely manner. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a proactive and systematic approach to regulatory compliance. This involves staying abreast of relevant legal and regulatory changes, conducting thorough impact assessments on existing systems and processes, and developing a clear implementation plan that prioritizes transparency and employee communication. When faced with new regulations, the decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the regulation. 2. Assessing the current state of the Workspace ONE deployment against these requirements. 3. Identifying necessary technical and policy adjustments. 4. Developing a communication plan for affected stakeholders, especially end users. 5. Implementing changes in a controlled and phased manner with robust testing and validation. 6. Establishing ongoing monitoring and review processes to ensure sustained compliance. Question 18. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong demand from the marketing department for a new cloud-based analytics tool that promises to significantly enhance campaign performance. This tool requires integration with Workspace ONE to deliver personalized content to mobile users. The marketing team is pushing for immediate deployment to capitalize on an upcoming promotional period. What is the most appropriate course of action for the IT team responsible for Workspace ONE management? Option A. Integrate the analytics tool with Workspace ONE and deploy it broadly, but instruct users to be cautious about the data they share with the application, relying on user awareness to mitigate potential security risks. Option B. Immediately integrate the analytics tool with Workspace ONE and deploy it to all marketing users to meet the urgent business need, assuming the tool's vendor has adequately addressed security concerns. Option C. Deploy the analytics tool to a small group of beta testers within the marketing department without a formal security review, with the intention of addressing any security issues that may arise after initial feedback. Option D. Conduct a thorough security and compliance review of the analytics tool, assess its integration capabilities with Workspace ONE, and develop a phased deployment plan that includes user training and ongoing monitoring, ensuring all organizational policies and regulatory requirements are met before full rollout. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough security and compliance review of the analytics tool, assess its integration capabilities with Workspace ONE, and develop a phased deployment plan that includes user training and ongoing monitoring, ensuring all organizational policies and regulatory requirements are met before full rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT where the desire for rapid feature deployment clashes with the need for robust security and compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the agility demanded by business units with the inherent risks associated with introducing new applications and services into a managed environment. The professional must navigate the technical complexities of Workspace ONE integration while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the exam's jurisdiction, which is assumed to be a general IT governance context without specific country mandates for this question. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise security posture and auditability. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a structured and compliant integration process. This involves thorough risk assessment, adherence to established change management protocols, and ensuring the new application meets all defined security and data privacy requirements before widespread deployment. This aligns with best practices in IT governance and security frameworks, which mandate a proactive approach to risk management and the validation of new technologies against organizational policies and regulatory expectations. By engaging relevant stakeholders early and following a defined integration path, the IT team demonstrates due diligence and upholds its responsibility to protect organizational data and systems. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves bypassing the standard security review and compliance checks to expedite deployment. This directly violates principles of IT governance and risk management, as it introduces unvetted applications into the production environment, potentially exposing sensitive data or creating vulnerabilities. Such an action could lead to regulatory noncompliance, data breaches, and significant financial or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to assume that the application's vendor-provided security features are sufficient without independent verification. While vendors offer security measures, they may not align with the specific security policies, data handling requirements, or compliance obligations of the organization. Relying solely on vendor claims without due diligence is a failure to exercise professional responsibility and can lead to security gaps. A third incorrect approach is to deploy the application in a limited capacity without a clear plan for monitoring and remediation of potential issues. While phased rollouts can be beneficial, a lack of defined monitoring and remediation strategies means that any security or compliance problems that arise may go undetected or unaddressed, increasing the overall risk to the organization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, always prioritizing security and compliance. This involves understanding the organization's security policies, data privacy regulations, and compliance requirements. When faced with requests for rapid deployment, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the potential risks associated with the new application. 2. Evaluating the application against established security and compliance standards. 3. Engaging with security, compliance, and legal teams to ensure all requirements are met. 4. Implementing a phased rollout with robust monitoring and a clear remediation plan. 5. Documenting all decisions and actions for auditability. This systematic approach ensures that technological advancements are implemented responsibly and sustainably. Question 19. Assessment of the most appropriate strategy for deploying VMware Workspace ONE security features in an enterprise environment to ensure compliance with data privacy regulations, considering the potential for extensive data collection and monitoring capabilities. Option A. Deploy Workspace ONE with its default security settings, relying on the vendor's presumed compliance with general data protection principles without specific organizational review. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with Workspace ONE data collection and monitoring capabilities before full deployment, ensuring alignment with relevant data protection laws. Option C. Focus exclusively on the technical efficacy of security controls, deferring any data privacy considerations until a specific compliance audit or incident occurs. Option D. Prioritize the implementation of all available advanced security features in Workspace ONE to maximize endpoint protection, assuming that robust security inherently satisfies privacy requirements. The correct answer is D. Prioritize the implementation of all available advanced security features in Workspace ONE to maximize endpoint protection, assuming that robust security inherently satisfies privacy requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between implementing advanced endpoint security features and adhering to data privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring and control offered by Workspace ONE advanced capabilities with the legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive user data. Misinterpreting or misapplying regulatory requirements can lead to significant compliance breaches, financial penalties, and reputational damage. The professional must exercise careful judgment to ensure that the chosen security posture is both effective and legally sound. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of the relevant regulatory framework, which in the context of the 2V0-61-19 exam implies adherence to general data protection principles and potentially specific U.S. federal or state regulations concerning employee data privacy and device management, as these are common in enterprise environments where Workspace ONE is deployed. This approach involves a proactive assessment of data collection, processing, and storage mechanisms within Workspace ONE, ensuring that any data gathered for security purposes is necessary, proportionate, and handled in accordance with legal requirements. It emphasizes obtaining informed consent where applicable, implementing robust data minimization techniques, and establishing clear data retention policies. This aligns with the ethical imperative to respect user privacy and the legal mandate to comply with data protection laws, thereby mitigating risks of non-compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing advanced security features without a prior data privacy impact assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for user privacy rights and a lack of due diligence in understanding the data implications of technology deployment. This approach risks collecting or processing personal data in ways that are not legally permissible, potentially violating data protection laws by exceeding the scope of necessary data collection or failing to obtain proper consent. Deploying Workspace ONE with a default configuration that enables extensive data collection and monitoring, assuming it is compliant by default, is another regulatory and ethical failure. This passive approach fails to account for the specific data privacy laws applicable to the organization's jurisdiction and user base. It can lead to the unintentional collection of sensitive personal information without adequate justification or safeguards, thereby contravening principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. Focusing solely on technical security efficacy, without considering the data privacy implications is a critical failure. While strong security is paramount, it cannot come at the expense of fundamental privacy rights. This approach overlooks the legal and ethical obligations to protect personal data, potentially leading to a situation where security measures inadvertently create privacy risks or violate data protection regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach that integrates security and privacy from the outset. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape. Identify all applicable data privacy laws and regulations relevant to the organization and its users. 2. Conducting a data privacy impact assessment, DPIA, before deploying or significantly altering Workspace ONE configurations. Assess the potential privacy risks associated with data collection, processing, and storage. 3. Implementing privacy by design and default. Configure Workspace ONE to collect only the data necessary for legitimate security and operational purposes, and ensure that privacy protective settings are enabled by default. 4. Establishing clear policies and procedures. Develop and communicate clear policies regarding data handling, consent, and user rights within the Workspace ONE environment. 5. Regularly reviewing and auditing. Periodically review Workspace ONE configurations and data handling practices to ensure ongoing compliance with evolving regulations and best practices. Question 20. Implementation of a new Workspace ONE UEM deployment requires a decision on the approach to user data collection during the initial device enrollment process. Considering the need to comply with data privacy regulations and ensure a smooth user experience, which of the following data collection strategies during onboarding best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations? Option A. Collect only the minimum necessary user information for device enrollment and authentication, with options for users to consent to providing additional data for specific features or services later. Option B. Implement a single, comprehensive consent screen at the start of enrollment that broadly covers all potential data collection throughout the device lifecycle. Option C. Automatically collect all device and user telemetry data by default during enrollment, without explicit user consent, to facilitate proactive issue resolution. Option D. Collect all available user attributes from the directory service during enrollment to pre-populate all potential fields, assuming users will benefit from a fully populated profile. Correct answer is A. Collect only the minimum necessary user information for device enrollment and authentication, with options for users to consent to providing additional data for specific features or services later. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing user data privacy and compliance within a Workspace ONE environment, specifically concerning the handling of sensitive information during device onboarding. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient device provisioning with the stringent requirements of data protection regulations, which mandate minimizing data collection and ensuring user consent. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes user privacy and regulatory adherence by implementing a phased data collection strategy. This method ensures that only essential information is gathered initially for device enrollment, with further data collection contingent on explicit user consent and justified by specific service needs. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, fundamental to many data protection frameworks. An incorrect approach that involves collecting all available user data by default during onboarding fails to adhere to data minimization principles. This can lead to regulatory violations by collecting more personal data than necessary for the stated purpose of device enrollment, potentially exposing the organization to risks of data breaches and noncompliance penalties. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on a broad, generic consent statement at the beginning of the onboarding process without clearly delineating what data is collected and why, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach may not constitute informed consent as required by regulations, as users may not fully understand the scope of data being collected or how it will be used. This can lead to legal challenges and erosion of user trust. A further incorrect approach that bypasses any explicit consent mechanism for data collection, assuming implicit consent through device usage, is a direct violation of privacy regulations. This demonstrates a disregard for user autonomy and data rights, creating significant legal and ethical liabilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, a risk assessment of data collection practices, and the implementation of a privacy-by-design approach. This includes clearly defining the purpose of data collection, minimizing the data collected to only what is strictly necessary, obtaining explicit and informed consent, and providing users with control over their data.